There is such inherent beauty in watching this. Each and every day we move fluidly through our cities on all of our routine and spontaneous routes dictated by our daily lives. This never-ending ebb and flow of human behavior has carved invisible riverbeds across asphalt and paving stones, dissecting curbs and circumnavigating obstacles as we follow the subliminal wayfinding desire inside ourselves. Hey everybody, and welcome to the channel. I'm Michael, urban designer, author, and host of the documentary series about urbanism, The Life-Size City. And this is the YouTube channel for the series, aka Urbanism's Happy Place on the internet. I thought I'd talk today about a little bit of my work in bicycle urbanism, one aspect in particular that is an endless source of fascination to me. A lack of data has been a catalyst for many a human throughout history to embark on long and strange journeys, and I am no exception. This video is about what I have learned staring at 106,000 cyclists in a number of cities around the world and studying their behavior. Back in 2012, I noticed something a little bit strange. I was looking around for research, any research at all, about cyclists' behavior, but I couldn't find anything. So I started digging deeper. I was Googling in 6 languages and wading through archives, stretching back for decades, to no avail. There was simply nothing out there. I suspected why. The bicycle was a completely normal transport form in virtually every city on the planet for decades. It was a valuable and effective tool for making our daily lives easier, but we didn't really spend much time thinking about it or studying it. A normal and nondescript tool, much like a vacuum cleaner. And much like vacuum cleaners and, I guess, vacuumists, there was a massive hole in the body of research regarding behavior. So I decided to become that guy. So since 2012, I have stared in great detail at 106,000 cyclists in about 20 intersections in different cities around the world. Let's face it, if you stare at 106,000 of anything, you are guaranteed to learn something. Anything. Grapes, cigarette butts, squirrels, Norwegians. You stare at it long enough and in that kind of volume, patterns are going to emerge. So what was I hoping to get out of all of this? To fill in the hole in behavioral studies about cyclists, absolutely, and to gather as much data as possible. And to gather data in order to tackle the vast ocean of personal perceptions about cycling. Everyone has an opinion, but as we know, anecdotes are not the plural of data. I wanted to find out how many cyclists deviate from traffic laws, to document whether or not this persisting perception of cyclists as, badly behaved was legitimate. Nobody had any numbers, so I wanted to find them. I wanted to study how cyclists interact with each other and other traffic users. I know that people will react positively or negatively to design, all sorts of designs. So I wanted to explore how bicycle users react to car-centric road design, even if they have bicycle infrastructure. I want to see how they react and to try and figure out why. I knew from the very beginning that I had to use direct observation. Now we have declared preferences. That's the kind of answers you get when you call people up and you do a survey. Hi, I'm taking a survey. Do you wear a seatbelt? Around the world, it's like 99% of people answering that question say, oh yes, I do. Because of course I do. That's the right answer that you want to listen to. Declared preferences are in many ways flawed. But then we have revealed preferences. People showing us how they do things in public space. And this provides so much more insight and details. In the first study, which I called the Choreography of an Urban Intersection, it was simple to start. I stuck a camera outside of my window and filmed an intersection for 12 hours. The intersection is a bit outside the city center. It is really a transport intersection. There are 2 streets that connect here, north-south, east-west. There are no real destinations in the intersection itself. People, by and large, just move through it. And you're gonna love this irony. When I turned on the camera just past 7 in the morning to make sure everything was working, this is the first thing that I saw. Great, right? Jeez. But after I was done filming, I had an anthropologist come into the office to start observing with me and recording all the data we could. It was time for us to look at something that hundreds and hundreds of millions of people have been doing for 130 years, and yet something that nobody has really noticed at all. We watched the ebb and flow of life and traffic in this intersection throughout the day, spending 250, 300 hours of direct human observation on it. Everything we found out with this first study from 2012 formed the baseline for all the studies I've done ever since. The first order of business was mapping out the trajectory of every single one of the 16,631 cyclists passing through the intersection. Wildly, we identified 57 different trajectories and behavioral variations. Then we started looking at how many cyclists were breaking a Danish traffic law, and we quickly realized that we were going to need different categories. The first group we called conformists. These are the ones who just did everything by the book. On the other end of the spectrum, there's a group we called the reckless. These are the ones who just smash their way happily through the traffic laws. But they're not only out in the traffic, these people are everywhere. They're in the supermarket, the bowling alley, the cafe, down at the gym, you name it. And you know them all too well. But then there was a third category that I called momentumists. And this is absolutely key. Planning a city for bicycles is all about momentum. What is the last thing that you want to happen when you're riding a bike, apart from getting hit by a texting motorist? Think about it. You don't want to stop. You are loath to stop the momentum of your bicycle. It is the nature of the machine, and understanding and accepting that is absolutely pivotal to bicycle urbanism planning. So momentumists were those people who kind of gently hacked the car-centric traffic laws and infrastructure in the intersection in order to keep their momentum, to keep on rolling. Doing it was one thing, but how they did it was also an important factor. Now here's an example. Normally turning left involves a so-called box turn, also known as a Copenhagen left, which has worked fine for decades. But some people, like the guy on the cargo bike at the top, they snaked their way gently through the intersection by watching the lights and timing their movement. Momentumism and A to Bism all in one. This woman was doing it from another angle, trying to win a small amount of time on her A to B journey by rolling through the pedestrian crossing. The bicycle has chameleon-like qualities. In a flash, you can switch between being a pedestrian and being a cyclist, and back again. Walking across the pedestrian crossing, and then wham, back to being a bicycle user. And here's another guy doing the same thing. Or you can just roll calmly through the pedestrian crossing, keeping an eye on other traffic users and the next light that you want to get through. I also observed many people straddling the fence, like this guy from a different intersection, swinging his leg around and using the bike as a scooter. Ooh, I'm not cycling, but I am maintaining my momentum. There was so much urban beauty in this flexibility. One of the coolest things, the wildest things that we discovered was observing momentumists. We could see a change in their body language. They would be riding along in whatever their normal posture was on their bike until they hit an illegal zone. And then they transformed themselves. Now, we don't need a PhD in psychology to know that we as humans, when we're embarrassed, when we're doing something that is maybe socially unacceptable to the herd around us, we will cover our faces. We do it when we're sad as well. We kind of shrink. We want to make ourselves a little bit invisible. I had assumed that people doing something socially unacceptable, like breaking a traffic law in public space, would do the same kind of thing. But the opposite was true. These momentumists, when they were doing something that they shouldn't technically, they did not try and shrink away. They actually changed their physical form and made themselves larger and more visible to the herd around them. Like this guy. He's making himself more visible, standing up off the saddle, rolling calmly through the intersection to make sure that everybody sees him. This behavior is incredibly considerate to other traffic users. When these momentumists who were doing this hit the legal zone again, they just reverted to their normal posture, riding their bike, and went off to do whatever they needed to do. But then the anthropologist I was working with had an idea. She noticed something, so we started to zoom in on some of these faces, and we started to observe it out on the streets as well. A pattern started to emerge. We noticed that all of these momentumists, while they were changing their physical form, making themselves more visible, being considerate to other traffic users, they also had kind of a goofy look on their face. They were kind of looking around. They weren't sort of hiding their head like this. They were kind of looking around, not really with a smile, a little bit of a pleasant expression on their face, as if to say to the herd at large, I know, sorry, an apologetic expression on their face until, like I said, they hit the legal zone and they sped off. I mean, yeah, it was incredibly amusing to observe and to discover, but all in all, it is considerate behavior by these momentumists. Now, 80,000 of the 106,000 cyclists that I have observed over the past decade were in Copenhagen. And as you might expect, watching 80,000 people in different intersections in one city is fascinating. But you know what? It was also pretty uneventful. Not surprising when you're in the world's safest cycling city. There were a few minor close calls, like this one, where this motorist is turning left at the top there. But that bicycle user didn't even flinch. People in this city are aware. They know to watch out for pedestrians and cyclists and, generally, each other. But then again, a close call is also incredibly subjective. Something that might look like, oh my God, that person almost died, to one person might look completely different to another. Me, for example. No drama at all. The choreography was smooth and elegant and well-timed by all users. The traffic users knew each other's movements by heart, and quite often they anticipated them. Now here are just a few other observations. I observed first movers. One person rolling past the stop line, like the guy at the top there, legitimizes it for others who come up from behind. If the person at the front stops at the stop line, the others generally follow that lead as well. This is a definitive behavioral trait in many aspects of urban cycling, but we see it also in pedestrians and motorists as well. Follow the leader. I can bend the rule a bit because that guy ahead of me, he did it first. Now the guy in gray there was pretty liberal in his interpretation of the traffic laws, but it was hardly dramatic. He's just trying to figure out how to get across the intersection. Calm and cool, and taking a bite of his breakfast as he continues on his way. Motorists were no angels in any of the intersections I filmed. Far more infractions from motorists than any other traffic users. Like the car at the top, cutting across lanes to turn left. But then, a nice human detail at the bottom. Two women having a conversation, one on a bike and one on foot. Oh, and this pickup truck douchebag using the street as a trash can. Really cool dude. But here's the cyclist version I observed on the same day. The guy tries to hit the garbage can. Oh, he misses it. So he stops. And he kind of awkwardly scoots his way back to pick it up. Now this is why we have tilted garbage cans for cyclists in this city, so your odds of hitting it are improved. There wasn't a lot of drama from pedestrians, mostly just taking a shortcut across the asphalt to shorten their crossing trajectory. Classic Desire Line behavior. And these motorists are trying to get through the light. 1, 2, oops, didn't make it. And now blocking the path for 6 other citizens on bikes who just have to try and figure out how to get around. Duh. Most of the reckless we observed were bike messengers, like this guy just blowing across the intersection like he's a car. There were, however, very few of them. And there was some, relative urban chaos once in a while. This bus didn't make it through the intersection, so it kind of blocks the way for a whole bunch of people on bikes. Some of them went around the back, some around the front, but most just waited for the bus to move. And then there are the human moments. Oh, it's a whole different category, but it is a joy to watch. Okay, we're turning right. No, I'm going straight. Oh, damn, okay, wait there. Okay, and he goes all the way back to her on the other side of the intersection. And, oh, okay, they're just saying goodbye. Yeah, see you later. Like I said, this was the first study that established the methodology I used for the next decade. I've observed many different locations in Copenhagen in order to continue gathering behavioral observations and data. Not only intersections, but also different locations where the design was flawed, and the behavior of the bicycle users helped me identify why it was flawed. One example is this busy corner where many bicycle users take a shortcut across the sidewalk, following their desire lines, trying to maintain their momentum. I mapped out where they went across the sidewalk in very specific detail and observed how they did so. While it might look chaotic, there were few conflicts, all very considerate. There should be a better solution for turning right at this location, and it is so bizarre that the city hasn't fixed it yet. Then there is what I guess is the world's largest behavioral study of cyclists in one intersection. This is the busiest bicycle street in the world, and in the intersection, I counted and observed over 43,000 cyclists right at this one location. There is such inherent beauty in watching this. Each and every day we move fluidly through our cities on all of our routine and spontaneous routes dictated by our daily lives. This never-ending ebb and flow of human behavior has carved invisible riverbeds across asphalt and paving stones, dissecting curbs and circumnavigating obstacles as we follow the subliminal wayfinding desire inside ourselves. Rarely aware of our patterns and directional choices, but studying them is an endless source of fascination to me. Attempting to decode the desire lines of cyclists and pedestrians on any urban landscape, a kind of anthropological infrared filter that reveals the previously invisible riverbeds of movement. 24 hours a day, the citizens of our cities are communicating with us, desperately so, sending us valuable information about how they use the urban theater. Instead of merely expecting them to do what we want them to do as planners and engineers poring over maps and computer programs in distant offices often do, It is more important now than ever before to listen to their needs and desires through observing their trajectories, placing anthropology and sociology first, and planning according to whatever it is we find out. So here are the main takeaways from the Copenhagen part of this larger study. How many broke the law? I needed to answer that question because nobody else could. What do you think? 80,000 cyclists in a variety of intersections in Copenhagen. How many do you think deviated from the Danish traffic laws? I asked a number of colleagues in Copenhagen what their guess would be, and they're bouncing back numbers like, oh, 20%, 30%, 50%, oh, those cyclists are crazy, and these are cyclists themselves as well. But everybody, man, was way off. You know what the average number was? 5%. And 1% of those were those irritating reckless, so it's really only 4%. Momentumists trying to hack their way through the city, and doing so in a very considerate way. The Danish Road Directorate, they did a study based on my methodology a few years later, and they ended up with exactly the same result. 5%. This is not Ragnarok. This is rather uneventful. I have a complete list of all the types of infractions and what time of day and where they happen and how they do it as well. There are so many amazing details in the data that I have mined, and none of it is very dramatic at all. Then there are studies in other cities. It is always exciting to be able to compare behavior and compare data between cities. I filmed 10 intersections in Amsterdam for the city of Amsterdam. I collaborated with a few academic types who didn't really get the memo about how to film properly and how to analyze it, but my team and I back in Copenhagen nonetheless could harvest an amazing amount of data and observations out of this material. When you go from uniform design to the chaotic, lazy planning in a city like Amsterdam, you're going to see differences. A lack of design uniformity and best practice creates a completely different choreography, and users of the design seek to improve it using their own intuition and desires. As I've said for years, cyclists in Copenhagen march like ants. In Amsterdam, they swarm like bees. Because of the layout of the cities, absolutely, but also because of the infrastructure design. My team and I proposed best practice solutions for this infrastructure in order to reduce the need for law breaking and to make it safer and to improve the flow of traffic. The city of Amsterdam, as I understand it, have implemented them in a number of these intersections that we filmed. In comparison, I observed that 15% of the cyclists in these 10 intersections in Amsterdam broke a Dutch traffic law, compared with the 5% in Copenhagen. Then there are the smaller studies in other cities focused on specific issues in specific locations, observing how people react to minimal infrastructure, as well as conflicting infrastructure design, like trying to connect unidirectional best practice with bidirectional, like we see in Montreal. It never really works, and you see it when you study it. Or analyzing the use of space in huge car-centric intersections in Barcelona. All is revealed. All of this is really just the tip of the iceberg. There are so many details, a huge pile of data from all of these studies, observations that we have discovered about cyclists in cities. I learned a lot and continue to do so every time I do it. I learned that the best practice infrastructure, the uniform infrastructure in Copenhagen, benefits behavior. It's amazing. It's intuitive for all users. And this really helps transferability when we're taking designs from one city and putting them into cities elsewhere around the world. Transferability is incredibly important, and all of these studies confirm that. It became incredibly clear through the past decade that, yeah, it's the infrastructure, stupid. Chastising bicycle users for their behavior when you haven't given them best practice infrastructure, or even worse, none at all, is completely useless. Give them the infrastructure they deserve. If there is a higher level of deviation on one street, on one location, in one city, then it is the fault of the design. Fix it. We know how, and we've known for over a century. One example of the kind of data that I ended up mining out of this was that I figured out when cyclists were most likely to deviate from the norms, from the traffic laws. What do you think? Was it during the morning rush hour with all of the congested cycle tracks? Or was it during the quieter periods during the day? You'd think it was the rush hour, right? I certainly did. All of these, cyclists moving along in the same direction, kind of crowded. You'd think people would want to deviate to get out of that. But the opposite was true. It was during the quiet periods in the afternoon. We are herd animals, so if we're stampeding along with the whole herd in the morning rush hour, we're less likely to deviate because there are a lot of eyes on us. The herd will notice. So in the afternoon, when the cyclists were more spread out, that's when people would say, yeah, nobody's looking. The herd is at the watering hole. I can deviate just a little bit right here. Nobody is watching. Super fascinating. One thing is for certain. I will never be able to unsee cyclist behavior. I can't look out the window, walk down the street in my neighborhood, sit at my local wine bar on the sidewalk watching the street without noticing, observing, recording, documenting, learning. Direct observation is so rewarding and informative. It will never get old or boring to me. Continuing to observe, gather data, and learn about the beautiful bicycle choreography in our cities. There you have it, a little bit of insight into my work in bicycle urbanism and behavior. That's it from me for today. Colville-Andersen is out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.